Mainstream media exists for the purposes of indoctrination and manipulation of public perception. The world of free and independent media is growing, and with the upsurge in information now available in the public domain, it has never been easier to access free and independent media. The exploration of this information resulted in an experimental project which would provide a fully supported space for researchers, whistleblowers, and seekers of all kinds to express themselves and educate the world. On the 1st of January 2015, Conscious Consumer Network was launched to the world. Nobody thought we would make it this far, but CCN is the longest running free and independent media network of its kind. CCN is a unique collaboration of hearts and souls, bringing you information from different perspectives to educate and inform. Since we started CCN, we have had only one desire: the pursuit of a free, fair, just, sustainable world, and this has not changed. Having overcome many challenges over the last 2 years, CCN is here to stay, and we've got great things lined up for 2017.
It's all right to be just a little bit crazy. Being creative is being a little bit crazy in just the right vibration. With that in mind, you should understand God's completely insane.
Paradigm shift.
An educational comedy.
It's not a cause, not a movement.
It's not a social group you can slap a label onto.
It's an idea. It's an intention.
It's an intuition.
A mindset in which reality can be explored.
It's a genuine expression,
Discernment.
critical thinking, and imagination.
To look inward upon ourselves.
To better understand the external world around us.
And yes,
Human egos are bound to be bruised.
With our silly, zany, politically incorrect,
George Carlin built style of going about things.
real and raw honesty.
Which invites you to be
to the fullest.
Reflecting off our skin. So burning stars are all we are, igniting from within. It's your heart and soul, it's your flesh and bones. Don't you let it go. You're the storm I find, bursting through my sky, taking all control. It's your heart and soul. It's your heart and soul.
Although some people are awake, there still seems to me that, I know this is controversial, so I'm just going to say it right out. If you have passion, you're not awake. That's what I do. Okay, you can't claim to be an awake and aware person and lack compassion. So, for example, yes, there are people, and there's lots to be said about this and that and the next, but there's compassionate ways in which to go about it rather than attacking. And we as a society, and I've noticed this program, and it's so sad because you've got a lot of these truth speakers, truth seekers waking up, coming into this movement, jumping into the communication mix on various social media platforms, and they've got what I call the Jesuit punitive programming, okay, which is if someone's done something bad, they must be punished, even if it's a verbal lashing. And I'm thinking that it really is about isolating this punitive aspect of our thinking of, damage and retribution. You know, if you're in pain, you've got to seek vengeance, kind of thing. And there is very much this thing inside the human psyche. And I suppose it does take a lot of calm, discipline, I don't know, yogi awareness, whatever you want to call it, you know, sit in silence, whatever you have to do to rid yourself of that anger and come to a place where, you know, even though you've been hurt, you don't project your pain onto others. Rather, you show compassion and empathy for the pain of others because you've suffered too. Yeah. That for me is awareness. Okay, it's not, you know, let's get our pitchforks out and let's go, you know, kill these guys because they're bad.
Don't forget the fake positive.
Yeah.
I'm positive, see? Don't you dare tell me otherwise, or you're of a low frequency. Energy is attached to you. If you tell me I'm not positive, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. I get this all the time with where people say, oh, why do you focus on such negative stuff? Because, you know, a lot of the work we do is exposing the darkness. And I love what you said there. It's not that I focus on the darkness. I'm a very happy, positive person because guess what? I shine light into dark places. For me, that's a positive. That's not a negative. It is absolutely about putting positive into a bad situation to manifest a positive outcome, which hopefully is awareness of the situation.
Yeah, totally.
Humanity lives in the sunlit world of what we believe to be reality. There is, however, unseen by most,
the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
Wanting to know the truth requires risking what you already have and what you're already comfortable with, which is why most people don't want to know the truth.
We came, we saw, he died.
And just really brainwash people.
This really stems from the fact that our society seems to have this trend of making the population feel like crap and then making money off of it in some way. I mean, you could see this anywhere from cosmetics to weight loss industry to big pharma and selling medicine for depression.
They prescribe shit.
The title of my talk today is Removing Mental Malware. Malware as in computer malware, where somebody writes a program and sticks it on your computer by way of a virus or something. It'll be the mental version of that. Step one is, do you want to know the truth? If you really want to know the truth, that requires you to put everything you believe at risk, to question everything you assume, to question everything you think you've already figured out. We believe what we're taught. We believe what we hear everyone around us telling us, what our teachers tell us, what our parents tell us, what the community around us tells us. You may have some pet theory, some conspiracy theory, or some weird theory that other people think are weird. And if you found out the truth, you might find you were actually wrong, that your theory was bogus. And if you're not open to that possibility, then you're not really going for the truth. On the other hand, there may be somebody who says, well, I believe what the mainstream believes, and I believe what everyone around me believes, and I'm not going to consider anything that sounds unusual or weird. They don't want to know the truth either. Wanting to know the truth requires risking what you already have and what you're already comfortable with, which is why most people don't want to know the truth. Assuming you actually want to know the truth, how do you get there? By using the scientific method, or the scientific process. I'm a huge fan of the scientific process. I think it's the only way to reach rational conclusions. However, I'm also a huge critic of a lot of people who stick the label scientist on themselves. The scientific process, in a nutshell, is you take in evidence, you take in data, and from it you try to extrapolate an explanation of reality, or pieces of reality. You try to get a worldview that actually matches the world outside of you. And sometimes you find out, whoops, well, that data made it look like this, but now this data makes it And so you have to test your theories and sometimes throw them out. A lot of people who wear the label scientists and pretend they like science, what they do is take in a lot of evidence, look at the stuff that already fits what they already believe, and the other stuff, that's just weird. We're going to pretend that didn't happen. So by the scientific process, I don't mean come to the results that are now usually labeled under science. I mean the actual scientific process of look at the world, take in all the evidence you can, and then try to figure out reality from that, even if the evidence is weird and disturbing and goes against what you already want. Another problem that stops people from using the scientific process is when it starts to point at a conclusion that they don't like. They will often bail out. If you start to see a rational examination of the evidence pointing towards you were totally wrong about something, most people will bail out and run the other way because they're invested in what they already believe in. Now, this is especially true if it's something you believed in your whole life, you've worked on, maybe you've devoted your career to something, and somebody comes along and says, I want you to consider this, and rationally look at the evidence and find out that your entire career was based on a gigantic lie. There's a huge motivation to not look at that, to not use the scientific process. That's what each one of us has to look out for inside our own heads. Are there any walls we put up because we think, I don't really like where that evidence and logic is leading me, I'm just going to kind of stick a wall there and pretend I didn't see that. That's the comfortable, easy thing. There are lots of conclusions people don't want to reach. There are lots and lots of conspiracy theories, and when people say conspiracy theory, they're usually bashing it, and what they usually mean is, I don't want to consider the possibility that the explanation for this event that happened is something that's really going to creep me out. So I'm going to call it a conspiracy theory. That is not scientific and that is not rational. When you have things happen like what happened in Boston and 9/11, I don't even bother telling people what I think very often or arguing the evidence. I just go to people and say, did you look at this evidence? Did you approach this wanting to know what happened? Or did you approach this determined that this will be the conclusion you reach no matter what? And that's most people, because most people don't want to know the truth. And the only people who ever move it forward are the ones who say, yeah, I want to know the whole truth. It might be unpleasant, and it might totally mess up my view of the world, and might mess up my life and everything else, but yeah, truth's got to come first. Assuming we want to know the truth, and assuming we know the scientific process, why do we come to so many different conclusions? What messes things up for us? Checking for warped perceptions. The primary problem in the world is not greed, and it is not hatred, and it is not malice. It's the fact that people's perception of reality is hugely twisted by things they're taught, by things they hear all around them, their upbringing. I think it's pretty self-evident that if you have one huge group of people who means well and wants truth and justice to prevail and sees reality as it is, and another huge group of people who wants truth and justice to prevail and they see reality as it is, they probably wouldn't be trying to murder each other. Which means the underlying problem in every war is not the hatred, even though there's obvious surface animosity while they're trying to kill each other. It's warping of perceptions. At least one side, and I would say both sides every time, their perceptions have been warped such that they think trying to kill that other guy is necessary for humanity, and the guy over there thinks trying to kill them is necessary for humanity. And if the one side or both sides whose perceptions were mangled could fix their own perceptions, the war stops. Because they suddenly realize, okay, you think you're the good guy and I think I'm the good guy. If we both understand reality, we'll probably stop killing each other. The problem is, this is something I refer to as mental lenses, things that are inside our head that warp the way we see the world. Everybody thinks he sees the world as it is. It's impossible not to. You think you see reality, you think you have a pretty good grip on reality. There may be things you say, well, I don't know about this and I don't know about that, but I have a general grasp on what's going on. Nobody thinks his own perception is messed up. Now, everybody can point to all sorts of other people's things. And pointing out that somebody else is delusional doesn't make them not delusional, even if they are. The only thing that moves humanity forward is if somebody dares to look inside their own head and say, Are there things that are messing up my perception of reality and making me do stupid stuff? Because the only one you can actually change is yourself. Unfortunately, most people would much rather shoot at other people than say, maybe my belief system is based on some bogus ideas. So for the past 10,000 years or whatever, we've just been killing each other because I'd rather kill you than think about my own paradigm. Not a good situation, but it is changing with events like this. Why would our perceptions be warped? When I talk about mental malware, I mean stuff that was put there intentionally to mess you up. Most of what we believe is passed on to us from our parents, our teachers, our friends, people around us, our society as a whole, the media, all the things we're exposed to. I do not believe that everybody out there telling a lie is trying to tell a lie. I believe the vast majority are just passing on lies that they were taught because they don't know any better. When parents teach their children stupid things that they learned, they're not thinking, ha ha, I'm going to get my kids for this one. They think they're saying reality to the next generation. When teachers teach the same garbage that they were taught that's untrue and based on a bunch of false paradigms, they're not trying to be nasty, they're just passing on their own misunderstanding. And this is why, number one, is important. We have to want to know the truth. Because if someone who cares about you and loves you is telling you this and they sound so sure of themselves, the hardest thing in the world is to think, well, you know, maybe you're totally wrong, Mom and Dad. You know, I know you mean well, I don't think you're trying to fake me out, but I think you and everyone around me might be totally wrong about this. Another reason people don't want the truth is if you're the only one who believes something, it's really uncomfortable. I suspect people in this crowd know that a lot more than the general public. Not being in the majority is an uncomfortable place to be, which tends to push us into a majority that all can feel confident that together they believe the wrong destructive things. For the purpose of this talk, what matters is getting it out of your head. Those of you who know about the Prussian indoctrination system and like John Taylor Gatto's work, you can very much see the openly admitted intentional design of programming people to be easily controlled and unthinking machines. It doesn't even matter if you got these warped perceptions by way of misinformed but benevolent sources or actual psychos trying to control you. Because either way, if they're stuck in your head and messing with your perception, then they need to be fixed. The primary example of malware that I talk about is the malware revolving around concepts of government and law and politics and authority and crime and all the terminology and all the thought processes that tentacles come out from the belief in authority. It's really easy to point to some bad guy, to point to some tyrant, to point to some regime and say, that's the problem, they're scary, they're bad, let's go do something about them. The main problem isn't the bad guys. The bad guys will keep being bad guys. The main problem is the power they get from the warping of the perceptions of their victims. And if you fix the perception of their victims, the control freaks don't have any power anymore. Everybody believes in government. They believe it's real, they believe in the law, they believe in authority, and they have all these perceptions that they think are based on reality. That is a great sign that you have somebody controlling what's in here. But if you're convinced that it's law and it's government and it's authority, literally people feel profound moral guilt at doing something that doesn't hurt anybody but disobeys the group of people who claim to be government, who claim to have the right to rule. I love the term law-abiding taxpayer because it's people proudly displaying their malware for all the world to see. I am proud that I give my money to a bunch of crooks and I do whatever they tell me. Law-abiding taxpayer. That is all it means. Lots and lots of history is good people who are taught to believe the lie of authority, either just spectating and doing nothing, or actively helping to dominate, oppress, or even kill their fellow man because authority told them to. And that's what I mean by the fact that the problem is not the psychos. There's only one reason we know the name Adolf Hitler, and it wasn't because of Adolf Hitler. It was because lots of people in Germany believed in the thing called authority. And so if the guy is in a certain position and has a certain job description, and he tells you to do something, well, you do it. you follow orders, you enforce the law. If they didn't believe that, what could one goofball with a stupid mustache possibly have done on his own? Same thing everywhere. Red China, Soviet Union, go anywhere you want. The mass oppression was not because all the individuals doing it thought, you know, today I just want to go hurt somebody. It's because they were raised with the malware of authoritarianism and government and law and all these concepts that go together so that they literally feel guilty about doing what they know is right. But Stanley Milgram did experiments which totally show that this applies to Americans as much as anybody else. We know what is right and wrong, and we will do the wrong thing if a perceived authority tells us to. That's the horrendous punchline. And I highly suggest everybody go check out this. It should be required. People should be forced to read that book. Stanley Milgram's book is called Obedience to Authority, and it goes all through his experiments, which is really creepy, but it's an outstanding expose on mental malware and the destruction it leads to, making good people do really nasty, evil stuff. Even inside the freedom movement, because the malware is so lodged in most people's heads, even the vast majority of people who say, I want freedom, they don't recognize their own malware. They don't even check for it. Because they think the problem's in Washington, D.C. Those guys are bad guys. And yeah, they are bad guys, but they're not the problem. And we have to go do something to that. And whenever that's the focus, you lose, because you miss the underlying problem of the world. The entire idea that we have to do something to the ruling class, whether it's we have to vote in people who will sit back and go petition them, we have to go have a protest, we have to have a revolution. There is nothing you can do to the control freaks who pretend to be government that will fix reality. As long as that malware is in their heads, it doesn't matter what you do to the current ruling class. Elections and petitions, even revolutions, they're pointless because that isn't the problem. If the problem is inside your head, shooting somebody in Washington isn't going to fix it. But if you imagine a world in which the malware is gone and tomorrow 300 million people wake up and say, I don't really feel a need to give a bunch of my money to them. In fact, I don't feel a need to use their crummy currency that keeps going down in value. I don't feel the moral obligation to obey their arbitrary, stupid commands, and I definitely don't want to fuel their war machine and their police state. So, now if one person does that, out come the jackboots and he gets stomped and killed and thrown in a cage. If 300 million do it, we're done. The end. As long as you're focused on doing something to the rulers, nothing fixes because they're not the problem. And all of their power comes from the malware in our heads, our perceptions that they have the right to do this, that their commands are law, that when they say give me money, it isn't robbery, it's taxation. These ideas in the heads of the victims are the problem. But what it comes down to is when people understand the malware, it goes away. Don't be scared of chaos and anarchy. Be scared of the guy who says, put me in charge, I will fix the world. He's not your master. You are your master.
the great benefit for me in calling out to the universe after I recognized I had really done whatever I knew to do, and still there was this force of suffering that was alive in me. Stop trying to escape. Stop trying to be somebody. Stop trying to get away. Stop trying to get something. Stop trying to keep something away. It actually means be still. But the mind hears be still and corrupts it into a meditation practice, as valuable as meditation practices are, and they are extremely valuable. But that's not what this is. It's not a practice. It's a moment of the deepest inquiry into the mechanism that's running the show. And in order to inquire into that mechanism, there has to be a willingness for the show to stop. And that's rare, or has been rare. It needn't to be rare, but it has been rare, because we have relied on the show to give us what it is we think we want. You may still want more, but you've gotten enough to know it's hollow. And that's extraordinary. To inquire really deeply into the lie, into the truth that is under the lie. It's under each lie. The truth is alive. It really hasn't gone anywhere. But under all of that is this depth of seriousness. What is your life about? And as a human being already, there is a privilege in the developed brain and the capacity to reflect and remember and play back and see moments of choice, moments of lying, moments of truth, and inquire deeper to see and experience the motivation. And it's your time to discover that. And it's your choice. And it's your choice to give everything to that discovery, or keep some back, or trivialize it, or say yes, or say maybe. It's all your choice. It's choiceless that it has arisen in you, that somehow you, and not your neighbor or your sister or your brother or whoever, somehow it arose in you. It called you somehow, whether you wanted it to or didn't want it to, whether you thought it was craziness or whether you thought it was enlightenment. It's it's a mystery. Maybe it's random. My teacher, Papa G, said it's just good luck, that's all. It's good luck. It just doesn't feel good for most of your life. Because it's not normal. It doesn't look like what you thought good luck would look like. You thought it would go away if you fed it enough stuff, or accomplishments, or successes, or self-esteem. But it won't go away until you meet it all the way. And so my role in your life is absolutely not to make you more comfortable in escaping your good luck, but to assist you in diving into it until you drown in it, until you just are the luck itself. Exciting, it's tedious, it's all about that. For being normal, ordinary, for being extraordinary with Shakti, it's all about that, all of it. Nothing excluded. We're happy in our relationships, we're sad in our relationships, it's all about that. Successful, failing, all about that. Everything is a vehicle. Everything can be turned away from. That's where free will comes in, and free willingness. And mostly we've used our free will to turn into safety and protection, because it is so huge to recognize that we are nothing. Really huge. I mean, it sounds good till you get close to it. And then it's like, oh no, really? Really nothing. And the mind immediately equates that with non-existence. It's not a correct equation, but that's what the mind does, of course. Nothing equals non-existence. If I am nothing, if I'm not somebody, that therefore means I do not exist. The truth is, what doesn't exist is who you think you are. Doesn't exist. It's all a lie. The good parts and the bad parts. And who you think everybody else is, too. It's all made up. It's the power of imagination. And it's wondrous in its own right. But regarding the truth of the matter, it doesn't in reality exist. And because of our identification with who we think we are, we assume if that doesn't exist, then I doesn't exist. But I is in fact existence. That all of the stories and the forms and the made-upness appear and disappear in. And so when the form of you disappears, I remains.
Let us not think in terms of principles and ideals, but be concerned with things as they are. For it is the consideration of what is that awakens intelligence. And the intelligence of the educator is far more important than his knowledge of a new method of education. When one follows a method, even if it has been worked out by a thoughtful and intelligent person, the method becomes very important, and the children and teachers are important only as they fit into it. One measures and classifies the child and teaches, and then proceeds to educate him according to some chart. This process of education may be convenient for the teacher, school boards, and administrators, but neither the practice of a system nor the tyranny of opinion and learning can bring about an integrated human being.
A man history records as being instrumental in the creation of America's public education system. Horace Mann was an American educator who served as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, part of the American Congress. Horace Mann was the key reformer of the education system at the time. In 1837, he became the head of the newly created Board of Education in Massachusetts, where he began the work that would eventually earn him the title as the Father of American Public Education. After reading through the educational models of different countries, Mann finally hears about a particularly successful style that had been developed in Prussia, which is now modern-day Germany. The Prussian system had shown to be such a success for the government's purposes that, accompanied by a few other educators, Horace Mann travels to Germany to investigate. Upon their return to the United States, they lobbied heavily to have the Prussian model adopted.
All in favor, say aye.
Interest in Prussia had also been growing in the northern half of the continent. Around this time, the Canadian Superintendent of Schools, Egerton Ryerson, traveled to Prussia in search of a new model of education. His journeys also included visiting Horace Mann in Massachusetts to further examine the system he would eventually adopt. George Brown, the editor of Toronto's Globe newspaper, was even quoted saying that Ryerson had successfully imported Prussian education into Ontario. During the next 30 years or so, a whole line of American dignitaries came to Germany to earn degrees. Interestingly enough, those who earned degrees in Germany came back to the United States to staff all the major universities. By 1900, all the PhDs in the United States were trained in Prussia. As the first secretary of the State Board of Education, Horace Mann promoted his new concept that the state is the father of children. He stressed that it was the responsibility of the state to ensure that education was provided for the child. A very noble idea, of course, but what exactly did he mean by that? And how did he define education? It seems like a very broad subject. It is a very broad subject. Education encompasses all of human history and all the knowledge we have gathered during that time. Not to mention, and perhaps most importantly, what we as human beings learn over our lifetime on a personal level. Horace Mann's 10th annual report in 1846 led to the first state law that made it mandatory for children to go to school. It was during that year that he supported the governor of Massachusetts in adopting the Prussian model of education for the entire state. How did he do that? The governor of the time, Edward Everett, as it turns out, was the very first to receive a PhD from, can you guess where? That's right, Prussia. From then on, it spread very quickly. Just after Everett installed the Prussian model in the state of Massachusetts, the governor of New York set up the very same method in 12 New York schools. Horace Mann's sister, Elizabeth Peabody, of the Peabody Foundation, saw to it that right after the Civil War, the Prussian system that was then being taught in the northern states was integrated into the conquered South. By 1900, most of the compulsory schooling laws that implemented the new system had been passed. From then on, every American child grew up under the Prussian system. So what exactly was the Prussian education system that everyone thought was so amazing that it just had to be adopted throughout the free world? To give you just a bit of background, in the 18th century, the Kingdom of Prussia, which is now modern-day Germany, was among the first countries of the world to introduce free and compulsory education. After the Prussians were defeated by Napoleon in 1806, it was decided that the reason why the battle was lost was that the Prussian soldiers were thinking for themselves in the battlefield instead of following orders. To make sure that this couldn't happen again, a new 8-year system of schooling was created. This new system provided not only the skills needed for the early industrialized world, such as reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also a strict education that taught duty, discipline, respect for authority, and the ability to follow orders. Elite children destined for higher offices went on to attend private schools, while the rest of the population had no access to the secondary education. They were destined for the working class. Through this new system, the Prussian court tried to create social obedience in the citizens through indoctrination. Every individual had to become convinced at the core of their being that the king was just, his decisions were always right, and the need for obedience paramount. In truth, the entire purpose of the system was to instill loyalty to the crown and to train young men for the military and bureaucracy. To do this, it was necessary to squeeze out all independent thinking from the masses. Influencing this new system from the beginning was Prussian philosopher Johann Gottlieb Fichte. Combining John Locke's view that the children are a blank slate and Rousseau's ideas on how to write on that slate, Prussia established an educational system that was considered scientific in nature. An important part of the Prussian system was that it defined for the child what was to be learned, what was to be thought about, and how long to think about it. In order to have an efficient policy-making class and a subclass beneath it, it was believed that one had to remove the power of most people to make sense out of the available information. In other words, critical thinking had to be done away with. Now, if you're wondering why the average person doesn't know that the North American education system is based directly on the Prussian model, it might just be because its original purpose was not designed for the good of the individual, but for the good of the government. The philosophy of Johann Fichte directly influenced the creation of the Prussian model of schooling, as he is quoted saying, "The schools must fashion the person, and fashion him in such a way that he simply cannot will otherwise than what you wish him to will." With quotes like these, you can see why his involvement is not well known. Education should aim at destroying free will, so that after pupils are thus schooled, they will be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished. When this technique has been perfected, every government that has been in charge of education for more than one generation will be able to control its subjects securely without the need of armies or policemen. In 1807, in a Berlin occupied by Napoleon, Johann Fichte gave a series of famous addresses to the German nation. Fichte spoke of the superiority of German people above all others. The content of these speeches was a catalyst for the Prussian education system and German nationalism. In other earlier works, he calls Jews a state within a state that would, quote, undermine the German nation. He openly expressed a desire to expel Jews from Germany. Fichte had a deep influence on the rise of the Third Reich, and continues to be deemed, quote, the spiritual father of modern neo-Nazism. Which begs the question, why would the father of American education make it a law that every child spend their youth in a system created by the father of neo-Nazism? Historians reflect that one of the greatest social factors that allowed a man like Hitler to rise to power was that the German people had been bred from birth to respect authority above all else and accept it without question. Which begs another question. If the entire population of North America is raised in a system adopted from pre-Nazi Germany, what are we setting ourselves up for?
All you have to do, all American mass media has to do, is to unplug their bananas from their ears, open up their eyes, and they can see it. There is no mystery. There is nothing to do with espionage. I know that espionage intelligence gathering looks more romantic. It sells more deodorants through the advertising, probably. That's why your Hollywood producers are so crazy about James Bond type of thrillers. But in reality, the main emphasis of the KGB is not in the area of intelligence at all. According to my opinion and opinion of many defectors of my caliber, only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years. Actually, it's overfulfilled because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. So the next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation. What matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense and economy, the influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized." This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., with benevolent dictators like Walter Mondale, who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not. Your leftists in the United States, all these professors and all these beautiful civil rights defenders, they are instrumental in the process of the subversion only to destabilize the nation. When their job is completed, they are not needed anymore. They know too much. Some of them, when they get disillusioned, when they see that Marxist-Leninists come to power, obviously they get offended. They think that they will come to power. That will never happen, of course. They will be lined up against the wall and shot. But they may turn into the most bitter enemies of Marxist-Leninists when they come to power. And that's what happened in Nicaragua. You remember most of these former Marxist-Leninists were either put to prison or one of them split, and now he's working against Sandinistas. It happened in Grenada when Maurice Bishop was already a Marxist. He was executed by a new Marxist who was more Marxist than this Marxist. Same happened in Afghanistan when first there was Taraki, he was killed by Amin, then Amin was killed by Babrak Karmal with the help of KGB. Same happened in Bangladesh when Mujibur Rahman, very pro-Soviet leftist, was assassinated by his own Marxist-Leninist military comrades. It's the same pattern everywhere. It's divided in 4 basic stages: demoralization, destabilization, crisis, normalization. They will be lined up against the wall and shot.
How to move through and overcome the abundant shock that, basically that a lot of people don't overcome it because, they have this
this avoidance reflex. They get frustrated and they avoid. But it would be better to realize that there's a part of ourselves that in order to make something real, requires this rite of passage or this hazing or this initiation, and that the self-abuse, as counterintuitive as this might sound, the self-abuse can actually be used to move out of the self-abuse and to better, be able to accept, better, more positive things. Because, when you've beaten the shit out of that proverbial wall enough times that you see it is still standing, then that's a solid reality for you at that point. You've done it enough to where you could say, okay, well, that's what this is, and that's solid and that's stable. So now I can believe in the stability of this reality. Because the whole abundance shock thing and being used to the comfort zones, the opposite of that is thinking, oh, if it's not in my comfort zone, then it's not stable. Even if it's nice, even if it's wonderful, there's no way it can last. It's not stable. It's going to collapse like a house of cards. So it's better to just, avoid the good things and remain in the suffering that I'm used to, because if I embrace the good things, I'm going to be even more hurt. Well, the way through it is to face the good things in a way that satisfies your addiction to suffering. So instead of avoiding the good things, embrace them. Let yourself have the level of suffering that you're used to while doing it. Beat the living crap out of that positive thing for as long as you need to make sure that it's stable and that it's not going anywhere. And then when your mind can be completely, fully, logically satisfied that you've met your suffering requirements, then and only then, in that last desperate act of surrendering upon the realization that, okay, maybe this good, positive thing might be fitting into my comfort zone after all, then and only then will you accept it.
Yeah. I mean, hey, you've seen me go through that process so many times.
We've all gone through that process, I think. Right now, Kristen's going through that process. Right now, Rochelle is going through that process hardcore. Right now, Richard is going through that process. You're going through that process. Paul's going through that process. And I'm going through like this, all these different themes throughout this year of discovery. I've been having like this weird inversion thing going on. Because even though I personally have cleared a lot of this stuff, one of the old sticky paradigms is that, oh, well, if I've cleared it, but everybody else around me hasn't, then that's a threat to me, that it's going to take my nice new positive place and collapse it and turn it into a nightmare. So I've gotten to watch everybody else around me go through all this stuff so that I can face the idea that, okay, even surrounded by all this chaos in the eye of this storm, I can still be me. I can look at it and see what about my own old paradigms that reflects. And then that forces me to face it and decide what I want to do with it. Because, I've already gone through the process of facing all these different paradigms that all of you were facing, but what people don't understand, the bigger challenge is that it's a two-sided coin. All those paradigms are one side, and we tend to ignore the other side. It's kind of like a really new agey thing to do. Okay, I've got this, so I'm going to shun the fucking dark now. You know what I mean? I'm in my spiritual empowerment. By empowerment, I mean narcissism. Anyway, so, it's just that's an easy trap to fall into. So it's now I'm being faced with that other side of the coin that most people run from or go into denial of or try to avoid or don't even want to believe it's there. So I'm facing that other side of the coin. Rochelle's put up a full wall, and the thing I'm facing is that, okay, she has the right to do that and beat herself up and, totally reject all of this so that she could see after she comes out of it, after she runs out of energy to fight it, that she still sees that no matter how many times she's punched it, that it's still there, it's still strong, it's still stable. And she needs to go through that. And it doesn't mean that I failed or I've done anything wrong or I'm a horrible friend or whatever. Just people are going to do what they're going to do. And if that's what she requires of herself to see that she's worthy of the good, positive things in her life, not just my friendship, but lots of other things that she's looked at and gone, oh my God, am I even deserving and worthy of this? Can I handle this? Then if she needs to beat the shit out of all that to see that it's all still remaining standing after all is said and done, then, you know, I've had to go through processes like that in my life. I had to go through hell in the face of positive in order to see that the positive still remains standing when the dust settles. Otherwise, it just wasn't going to be real for me. And Rochelle's going through that. And Richard is facing a lot of things lately, especially, you know, when it comes to his relations with females, and seeing that, you know, he can face all these paradigms inside himself and have his external reality reflect these various issues, and that when he stands strong in it, that, you know, all is well and the dust settles and everything's still all good. So what have you both been facing lately? I mean, I know the answer to that question, but for the viewing audience, tell us.
Oh, well, so we've been facing issues with completely transcending one salary level, going to another one. We just moved over here to Maui, and this was the Hawaiian island that scared the crap out of us. It was the one that we denied ourselves for a while. First, when we came over to Hawaii, we were like, well, we can go to Hawaii, but we can't go to the best island. We have to go to, like, the third best island. So why don't we go into the big island? And I know that third best is in, like, they're objectively better than each other, but the one that was, like, the least likely for us to enjoy. We went to that one first. We went to the one that was, we went over to Oahu, which is where Honolulu is, and it was entirely a fear-based move. Like,
You're starting to get kind of mumbly and garbly. So move back from the phone a little bit. So yes, well, there's such a thing as too close to the phone, just as there is such a thing as too far from it.
I see. Well, let's find the Goldilocks spot.
Yeah, exactly.
So, anyways,
there we go. Right there is perfect.
Finally, this is good?
Yeah, that's good.
Awesome. So we are finally in a place where we wanted to be in the first place and wouldn't allow ourselves to have for almost a year. And it has definitely been bringing up a whole bunch of our own abundant shock stuff, whereby we are insisting on being miserable and being afraid of the boogeyman in the closet, even though everything is working out really well. So today I went and bought a whole bunch of clothes for my new job, because I have a killer new job that I'm very happy about having landed. And I mean, objectively, it was a great day. I picked up a wardrobe that was probably about a $500 wardrobe for less than $300, like $270. And everybody that we talked to today was just so friendly, and we kept, like, everything, literally everything that I bought was on sale.
You got an $80 pair of shoes for $30.
Yeah, I got an $80 pair of shoes for $30. It's cheaper than the thrift store, and it's brand new.
Yeah. I don't pay retail for anything, so I love it when that happens.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. So, and I found that Katharina and I were getting really snippy with each other halfway through this awesomeness, because we're starting to have ourselves a little argument about stupid stuff that it was really just going. You know, we were both being victimized by our own paradigms, and we thought we were doing it to each other. So it was very interesting to observe that, and so what we did was we went out to a local beach, and we just, like, sat there and ate some fruit and prayed and kind of recentered ourselves, and realized that it was really just our own internal thermometers that were saying, wait, all this really good stuff is happening, so the shoe's going to drop.
Now we have to have a fight.
Right, now we have to have a fight. We can't have a relationship and get really good deal on clothes and have a good job and have a good life. Like, you got to fit.
Oh God, me and Katarina also went through our fair share of that sort of thing within our friendship as well. The better things got, there had to be these moments of drama in order for us to not feel completely outside of our comfort zones.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're taught all during your childhood that, you know, when something good happens, something bad happens, to balance it out.
Or she's gonna drop.
And it's stupid. I remember
no pain, no gain, hard work, struggle and suffer. So if you did anything, if you have anything positive without suffering, it's going to collapse in on itself like a house of cards, because it's only solid and reliable if you've suffered.
Right. If you work for it. And nobody, you know, it took me 30-something years to realize there's a difference between work and toil.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the paradigm shifts I've been going through recently was realizing that everything that I do is work. And of course I'm working for it. I'm working for whatever it is that I have in every moment. If I go out, you know, every time I leave my front door, I'm working. Every time I talk to somebody, I'm working.
In physics terminology, yes, you are extending, you are working.
Right. So,
or if you put work in the toil context, which most people do, there's the old quote of, if you make what you love doing your career, you'll never work a day in your life.
Right.
Because, I mean, that doesn't mean you're not going to be doing a lot. You're going to be totally physically, mentally, actively doing all the stuff that people define as work, but there's going to be no suffering involved.
I mean,
been your journey.
That's been my journey. I mean, when I first met Katarina, she told me that her business goal was to get paid for being herself, and I said, "You're stupid. That's not possible. You have to pretend to be somebody else to get paid." Yeah, and you know, I realized that as I've started my own projects that I'm passionate about, I work on them 60 to 80 hours a week.
You know,
and I love them.
Once you guys get, like, you know, it's a journey over time, but once you guys get uber awesome results with your YouTube channel, and, you know, a bunch of money starts coming in from that, it'll show you, oh yeah, being myself, I can actually make that my career and get paid for that. That's not just some bullshit thing that Katarina pulled out of her ass one day because she smoked too much weed or whatever it was that you were thinking about it at the time.
Right. It's so true. And also to realize that when you start getting paid for this stuff, it is because of all the work that you did at the beginning. I've been working on my YouTube channel for about 2 hours, sitting on the couch, and you know what? I'm not going to receive a paycheck for it today or on Friday. I'll receive a paycheck for it for the rest of my life.
You know, most businesses that people sink like 50 grand into to, you know, to start up, like storefront businesses or whatever, like, they usually don't make $1 for 7 years on average.
Exactly.
And so it's like with something like YouTube, it's like you're paying nothing but time and effort. No, you don't have to drop 50 grand on a major risk. And I think that makes YouTube like one of the most triggering things. Like, if you recall, you know, way back in the day, I think Paul, I think you were on this call too. You may or may not have been. I'm trying to remember, but do you remember the hangout called "How to Fail at Making Money on YouTube"?
Yeah, I believe that. I think I was on that one.
Yeah. I wasn't 100% sure. I have to check back, but yeah, that definitely. And the whole premise around that is people get super ultra triggered about YouTube because it's a complete violation of their comfort zone. Like, wait a minute, I can just go on there and be myself and make money. So then they sabotage themselves and go, oh, well, I can't, you know, plant the tree seed today and have the 40-foot tree tomorrow, so I shouldn't even bother. Like, as if that's a requirement. Like, oh, I should be able to be on there for 1 or 2 days and have it rain thousands of dollars. If I can't do that, well, fuck it. I'm just not good enough to use YouTube. I'm not worthy. I'm not deserving. I'm stupid. I'm not going to be able to make that work. So fuck it. I shouldn't even try. That's a story they tell themselves. themselves. The real thing is they are afraid of their success. They're afraid of being contradicted. Like, oh my God, if I just go on there and I'm just being me, and like I start to build a nice demographic over a few years and I start getting paid for this, that's going to totally contradict what I think reality is. And I'm going to feel like I'm walking around in an alien world where I don't know the physics and I'm totally out of my comfort zone, and oh, woe is me. So that's pretty much the main thing that freaks people about stuff like YouTube, and why they stay away from doing anything with it, because it blows away most of their excuses. The excuses that they tell themselves. I don't look good enough. I'm not pretty enough. I don't speak well enough. I'm not artistic enough. I'm not this enough. I'm not that enough. You know, and it expands through everything in their lives that they used to keep themselves beat down. So like if they see that they could do decently on YouTube and all they've done is just be themselves, that blows away like, 98% of the excuses that they tell themselves on a daily basis to keep themselves in their comfort zone of misery and self-loathing.
Which really is most people's comfort zone. And when you want to get them even a little bit outside of that's where this abundance shot comes in, because you invite somebody to loathe themselves a little bit less, and they get angry about that. People will fight for they'll fight for limitations.
Yeah, people are so addicted to the wishing and the wanting and the hoping and the imagining of, oh, wow, wouldn't it be cool if that were this? And they're so addicted to that because they know that they can remain in their comfort zone of misery and enjoy those feelings of imagining potentials, because as long as they're not actually really literally living them, then they're still, snuggled up safe in the blankie of their comfort zone while imagining all this other stuff. I think that's another reason why a lot of people like sci-fi and fantasy. Now, my reason for enjoying sci-fi and fantasy is just like, I think it's cool as fucking shit, and it would be awesome if it was real, and if it was real, I'd dive right into that in a second. But a lot of people like it so that they can feel the coolness and awesomeness of the imagined potentials while still remaining firmly rooted into their comfort zone of misery and suffering. So they use it as like to take a quick break from their suffering, but in such a way that it's not a complete break. They're still nestled in the nest of their suffering, but they're not feeling the full-on profoundness because they're taking a little mental break and watching a TV show right now.
I mean, I used to do that with video games. Video games for me were a way of climbing up an artificial ladder, when the fact is that I wasn't doing anything that I actually wanted in my life. And it took me a long time. I had to put video games away for probably about 5 years while I developed a healthy relationship with what I actually want in my life. Yeah. And only recently have been re-exploring them, and in a much more healthy way.
Yeah, video games are really great for brain training. But it's brain training is like a hammer. You can bash someone's skull in, or build something constructive with it. So it's like, video games can be used to improve hand-eye coordination. They can be used to build neural networks for problem solving and strategy, and all sorts of productive uses that video games can be used for. But they can also be used as an escape mechanism. Kind of like drugs and like weed, for example. Like medically, weed cures most diseases. Weed is healthy. Weed is nutritious, and weed can actually overclock and open up those neural networks to lead to lots of productivity. But at the same time, if all you're doing is focusing that on sitting there going, that's cool, like Beavis and Butthead, then all you're doing is creating more neural networks that are geared around sitting there going, and when you've got enough of those formed, it forms what some people call being a permanent stoner. So that even when they're not high,
you don't know any of those in Hawaii.
Yeah, even when they're not high, they're still acting like they're high, because from all the times they've gotten high, and they had this overclocking of genius inside of them that they were focused on zoning out into nothing. They got really, really good at staring into space obliviously, going, dude, So they've got all those neural networks that are built up for that. So now even when they're not high, they've locked themselves into that pattern because the weed overclocked efficient neural network development. And what kind of neural networks did they develop? You know.
Hey, it's like the whole town of Paella.
Oh, man.
And then we blame the tools because of our own unwillingness to take personal responsibility. Oh, food is evil. It made me fat. No, food is required to sustain your life. If you stopped eating indefinitely, you would fucking die. But that doesn't mean that you can't abuse food.
Totally.
People just don't want to take personal responsibility because that would exit them out of their comfort zone. If I can't see myself as a victim, I can't stay in my comfort zone of misery. And then what would I do?
So Dave, you're trying to tell me that you have no more paradigms to clear about this? You're totally transcended. You've totally gotten beyond all of
No fucking way. As a matter of fact, I said I am now facing the other side of the coin of that, and that most people avoid that other side of the coin. And in that avoidance, they end up becoming fake gurus and spiritual narcissists and, you know, all this other stuff. They go into this deep denial. It's like, you know, it's like the people that stick their toe in the water and assume they've gone for a swim. You know, it's just like, yeah, okay, so like, you know, you did the first part of it. You're on the second square on the game board, but then you're acting like there's no more game board.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so like I said, a lot of people around me are facing that first square, that first side of the coin that I've already faced, but that first side reflects the second side. Because it's a coin, it's two-sided, right? Technically three-sided if you want to imagine, you know, the border of the coin between the two sides, and this is the third dimension and all. But, you know, so it's like most people, you know, they face the first side, and then they're like, oh, I'm done. It's like, yeah, no, fuck you. You're nowhere near close to done. It's like you took all those years to face that first side. Now everything you know about that first side is going to be there to help you in the next number of years of facing the second side, provided you don't avoid it and run from it. Right. Oh yeah, so I'm like in like the next part of that journey. It's like going deeper down the rabbit hole. You know, most people they just hang out around the border of the rabbit hole and think they've actually done something. You know, oh, I looked down. I saw Alice down there somewhere. All right, I'm done. I've made my journey. It's like, no, you haven't. Yeah, and it's all about that comfort zone. We trick ourselves into thinking we become enlightened in order to go back to our old comfort zone while pretending we've transcended it. Oh, I watched a few quantum physics documentaries. I'm good. I'm master of all. It's like, yeah, right. No, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And just like people in the truth movement, you know, they have a few pieces of information like, oh, I know everything about the Illuminati, and if you disagree with me on anything, you're a government paid shill or a stupid sheep or whatever. So I'm going to just totally spit out venom and contempt at you, which is, you know, is what the elites want, divide and conquer. But I'm going to ignore the fact that I'm acting like a big, ginormous hypocrite asshat right now and act all smug and superior in order to put myself in denial about my inferiority complex that I'm overcompensating for with my superiority complex. I see a lot of that in the truth movement.
Yeah, that reminds me of the dude that was the hotel owner that Paul hung out with in Costa Rica, who looks at Alex Jones all the time.
Yeah, Alex Jones he's right about a great many things, but he's also his own worst enemy at the same time. Because he's not realizing that you know, he is playing into the same divide and conquer tactics. He's you know, I mean, he's giving all the statistical data. That's all well and fine. There's, you know, this person behind this false flag, that false flag, whatever. But he doesn't go into like the whole, all right, the reason this minority of psychopaths has been able to run the world is because we have complacently let them. and we need to drop our differences with each other and, you know, work together and drop our addiction to feeling right and indignant and justified and, oh, I'm the victim. Those naughty Illuminati are the problem. They're the blame. Oh, I'm the victim. They're the blame. You know, and it's just like, no. It's like, you know, the psychopaths who run the world are a symptom of the problem, not the cause. We have caused the problem in our own complacency because we want to stick in that comfort zone of misery, and we freak the fuck out when we exit it and we go into abundant shock. Like, you ever notice that every time the quote-unquote good guys score a major victory against the psychopathic elites, the truth movement collectively goes into abundant shock and starts acting like a bunch of dicks?
I have not noticed because I don't really hang out in those circles.
I travel through many different circles. But yeah, as soon as any sort of major victory is scored, it's like, you know, they start going into abundant shock and acting like pompous assholes with each other. And soon you start seeing everybody calling everybody out and accusing everybody else of being this, that, and whatever, because they're desperately trying to get back into that comfort zone of, oh, I'm completely repressed by the elites. You know, that's the comfort zone. So as soon as they step out of it for just a second, because some victory on some front was scored, it's just like, oh my God, I'm triggered. I have to pull myself back into full-blown victimization.
Madam, we're going to get through this show whether you like it or not.
Darking the campus, hot as a wire, stealing the reverence, tantruming fire. Woman, you shun me, flip me the bed. Tell me it's tasty, my every word. Screaming at the crowd, hear every word, and sound fun to you. Smells like she sounds, crunchy sewage mound. She's hungry like an SPW. Friendly swine, is this holy wine? Disagree with her is shame on you. Mouth is contempt, entitled hellbent. She's hungry like an SPW. Stopping the lecture too obnoxious to hide. She sits behind you people wondering what I do. Red eyes bleeding, pull up her license eyes. I feel the heater handle venomous fight. Screaming at the crowd, her every word yells out, fuck you. Smells like she sounds, like she's sewage mouth. She's hungry like an SPW. Rattling swine, if it's holy wine, disagreeing with her is shame on you. Mouth is contempt, entitled hellbent. She's hungry like an SPW.
We have an open panel and a Q&A session because we want an open idea. Oh, I'm a racist. There you go. That's a new one. Where'd you learn that one in Social Human Studies 101? Right next to the giant, I don't know, wild boar I couldn't see who said there's no such thing as fat chicks. Guess what? If you think they're orange, you are one, okay? Did he just make a fat joke? Yeah, I did. And no, it's okay, because I got some here, so screw you. I have a faggot pass and a fat pass today.
Screaming in the ground, her every word yells out, fuck you. Smells like she sounds, crunchy sewage
On the morning of September 11, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world using a satellite phone and a laptop directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York, while in Washington a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon and the Budget Analyst Office where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-TECH, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. The SEC destroyed their records on the investigation into the insider trading before the attacks, but that's okay because destroying the records of the largest investigation in SEC history is just part of routine record keeping. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC-7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. The FBI has argued that all material related to their investigation of 9/11 should be kept secret from the public, but that's okay because the FBI probably has nothing to hide. This man never existed, nor is anything he had to say worthy of your attention, and if you say otherwise, you are a paranoid conspiracy theorist and deserve to be shunned by all of humanity. Likewise him, and her. And her, and her, and him. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. This is the story of 9/11, brought to you by the media which told you the hard truths about
his head could be seen to move violently forward.
And
they took the babies out of the incubators.
And
mobile production facilities.
And
the rescue of Jessica Lynch.
If you have any questions about this story, you are a batshit paranoid tinfoil dog-abusing baby hater and will be reviled by everyone. If you love your country and or freedom, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, you will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever. This has been a public service announcement by the Friends of the FBI, CIA, NSA, DIA, SEC, MSM, White House, NIST, and the 9/11 Commission. Because ignorance is strength.
Hey, how you doing?
Yes, I've travelled across space to check on the progress of your species.
Cool. Shall I take you to our leader?
Your what?
Our leader, the guy in charge.
The guy in charge of what?
Well, in charge of everything.
You have one guy in charge of everything?
No, he's in charge of government.
What is government?
Well, government makes the rules for us. It tells us what we can do and what we can't do.
So is government really smart? They come up with wise rules for you to follow?
Well, mostly. But some of its rules are really stupid.
Do you disregard those rules?
No, we have to follow the rules, even if they are stupid or we disagree with them. Government punishes anyone who disobeys the rules.
So you are slaves to government?
No, it's not like that at all. Government works for us, the people. It serves us. We're the boss.
It tells you what to do, and it punishes you with violence if you disobey it, and yet you're its boss?
Yeah.
But there are some things government does that you don't like.
Well, yeah, not everything government does is popular. Like spending on wars, for example.
What is a war?
It's when government basically spends the people's money on weapons and soldiers and then sends them over to the other side of the world to kill a bunch of people over there and destroy their country. I don't like it that government does this.
Well, I can see why you might not like that. Have you humans reached the stage where you generally consider stealing, enslaving and killing each other to be bad things?
Oh yeah, we know that. Don't steal, don't attack, don't assault.
But you give money to government and they use it to kill people.
Well, yeah. But government does good things with tax money as well.
Why don't you stop paying for the things you don't like and only pay for the good things it does?
No, we can't do that. You can't just decide to stop paying taxes because the rules say that everyone has to pay taxes.
But the rules come from government though, don't they?
Yeah.
So government made a rule which says that everyone has to pay them money. So everyone pays taxes because if they didn't, government would punish them using violence?
Well, yes, but most people don't mind paying taxes. Most people feel obligated to pay taxes and obey government laws because it's for the good of society. Society needs government, and that means we all have to pay taxes.
So just to make sure I've got this straight, government makes the rules and you feel obligated to follow the rules, even the ones you don't like, and it tells you what to do and threatens to punish you if you don't do what it says, and it uses some of the money that it's taken from you using threats of violence to pay for things you don't like and actually think are immoral, like mass murder.
Yeah, but we can ask it to please tell us to do smart things, and please don't take our money and use it to kill people. We're allowed to ask them to tell us to do what we want them to tell us to do.
Are you guys just scared of this thing? Is government some huge monster that can just squish you at any moment if you disobey?
No, government isn't a monster.
Well, what is it then? Could you draw me a picture of it?
Government isn't really the sort of thing you can draw a picture of.
Maybe you could take me to it. Where is government?
You mean the building?
Government is a building.
No, but the politicians who make up the government have buildings they work from.
So government is a group of these politicians?
Yeah.
Okay, so what species are these politicians?
Well, they're human.
Like you?
Yeah.
So politicians are humans and they're government. You're a human, but you're not government.
No.
So it's the politicians, they're the ones that boss the rest of you around and make you do things you don't want to do and take your money using threats of violence. But even though you're all humans, you're not allowed to boss them around and take their money?
No, they'd put us in a cage if we did that. But look, it's not like the politicians can just do whatever they want. Like, a politician can't just come up to me on the street and make me give him money. They can't do that. Politicians can only do things like that in their job, when they're working for government.
Oh, so politicians aren't government, they just work for government?
Yeah.
Okay, so government isn't a monster, and it isn't a building, and it's not politicians, it's something else. And it employs politicians, who are just regular humans, who get to order everyone else around and take their money. How does a regular human become a politician?
Well, that's the great thing about our government. It's a democracy, and that means that the people actually have the power, because we get to decide who among us get to be the politicians. We get to vote. And if a politician starts doing things we don't like, we can just replace him with someone else at the next election.
So the people that get chosen to be politicians only get to boss people around and take their money for a short time, and then they go back to being regular humans?
Exactly.
That sounds like a powerful position to be in. But if you get to choose who does that, I assume that politicians are always the wisest, most honest, caring and respected people among you.
Well, no, not really. I wouldn't say politicians are known for being honest, or wise, or caring. And they're certainly not the most respected people among us. Come to think of it, most politicians are lying, power-hungry crooks.
The ones you chose?
Yeah, they're always doing things we don't like. They use taxpayers' money to enrich themselves and their friends, and they never keep their promises to voters. They've been caught stealing and lying and taking bribes, and they mostly do what the big corporations want. Yeah, they're always doing stuff like that. They're completely corrupt. They're a bunch of lying crooks.
But you said that most humans know that stealing and beating each other up and killing are wrong. And you said that you have the power because you can change who's in charge. So why don't you just replace the lying, thieving, murderous, crooked politicians with some regular people?
Well, we don't try to elect lying crooks. It just always turns out that way. But we have to have a government because some humans are nasty and might kill or enslave or steal. Civilization just couldn't survive without government.
Let me get this straight. Because you're worried about the small number of nasty people that are willing to kill, enslave and steal, you think it's necessary for your survival to have a system where some humans among you, for a short while, get to call themselves the government, and they get to order everyone else around like slaves and, if they want, commit mass murder overseas, using money they stole using threats of violence. Politicians get to kill, enslave and steal, because if they didn't, someone else might. And you try to elect good, honest people to be politicians, but what happens every time is that the people you elect turn out to be corrupt, evil, lying crooks. That's your system.
Yeah, that's pretty much government.
Communist China under Mao Zedong, the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin, Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler, Throughout history, authoritarian regimes have inflicted oppression, extortion, enslavement, terrorism, torture, and murder upon innocent people. Many Americans firmly believe and confidently proclaim that such a thing could never happen in the United States. But is this just wishful thinking? Or is there something fundamentally different about the United States that renders it immune to the tyrannical oppression that has plagued every other major empire in history? The first step in analyzing the claim that it can't happen here is to identify and define what it is. Many people have an oversimplified, almost comic book type view of tyranny, an image of the obviously malicious dictator wringing his hands while cackling maniacally about ruling the world. In the real world, tyranny has always come about under the guise of defending the nation, protecting the people, and creating law and order. To gain power, a tyrant, at least to begin with, needs the support of the people. A successful tyrant cannot openly exhibit malice and lust for power, but must craft his message so as to convince the people that his intentions are noble, that he wants truth and justice to prevail, and that the way to make that happen is to give him power and control. Authoritarian regimes grow by exploiting people's fears, worries about economic troubles, crime, foreign invaders, and so on, and convincing the people that the solution is for a political leader to be given total control so he can protect the people from the evils of the world. This is always the template out of which tyranny grows. No matter how repressive or brutal a regime becomes, those in power will continue to claim good intentions, and will insist that extraordinary government powers are necessary to protect the people and to create justice and order. Throughout history, every time humanity has taken a step away from freedom and towards tyranny, it was done in the name of serving and protecting the nation and the people. But because every candidate, every political party, every regime claims to be for peace and freedom, for truth and justice, for protecting the innocent and defeating the wicked, how can the potential tyrants be recognized and kept out of power? Every tyrant claims to have noble motives, insists that the people should trust him, and promises to use his power for good. Finding the truth, therefore, requires one to look past a politician's words and to focus instead on his actions. There are several basic philosophical principles which tyrants always seek to undermine and destroy. In any country, determining whether these principles are being respected or violated indicates whether that country is headed towards tyranny, or is already there. Historically speaking, it is a relatively new concept to suggest that there are limits to what rulers may do to their people. The Magna Carta 800 years ago expressed the radical idea that even the king should be subject to certain restrictions. Subsequent English law and later the US Constitution specifically described certain things that those in power can never have the right to do. Several examples of this are found in the first 10 amendments to the US Constitution, collectively known as the Bill of Rights. This would include freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures, freedom from being forced to testify against oneself, the right to be armed, the right of an accused to a trial by a jury of his peers, and so on. The Bill of Rights did not claim to create any of these rights, but instead identified such rights as inherent to humanity, pre-existing and outranking all man-made authority of any kind. Rights that should never be violated, even if the majority supports such violations, and even if those in power claim that such violations are urgently necessary and are being done with the best of intentions. The authors of the Bill of Rights were well aware that once these principles are abandoned, the end result will always be unbridled tyranny. With that in mind, we will examine several of these fundamental principles to see where they have been respected and where they have been violated. The U.S. Constitution describes a very restricted, limited role for the federal government to play. The 9th and 10th Amendments, the last two in the Bill of Rights, declare not just that there are some things the federal government may not do, but that it may not do anything except for what is clearly and specifically authorized by the Constitution. Congress was not intended to have the power to control, regulate, or prohibit whatever it wished, but to have power only over certain specific matters. Such a concept cannot be found in the founding documents of the notorious tyrannies in history. On paper, this would seem to be a fundamental difference between the United States and many other regimes. But has that difference translated into reality? The federal law books today are full of thousands of pages of laws imposing taxation, regulation, and sometimes criminalization of matters which the Constitution never put under federal jurisdiction, including education, healthcare, food, retirement plans, caring for the poor, air travel, trains, cars, alcohol, tobacco, drugs, firearms, explosives, gambling, communications, employment practices, farming, wildlife, and all manner of production and manufacturing. In order to acquire and maintain power over such matters, politicians appointed judges to manufacture legal excuses for ignoring the constitutional limits on federal power. Of note, the Constitution itself does not say that the courts are the ultimate deciders of what is or is not constitutional. Nonetheless, shortly after the Constitution was written, the U.S. Supreme Court simply declared itself to be the ultimate judge of constitutionality. Since then, the federal courts have gradually whittled away at the concept of limited powers, fabricating justifications and rationalizations for violating the principle. One significant example occurred in 1942, when the Supreme Court ruled that Congress could regulate and control a farmer growing and consuming his own wheat on his own property under the Interstate Commerce Clause of the Constitution. The outrageous rationale was that the farmer growing and consuming his own wheat, though such activity is neither interstate nor is it commerce, might have an indirect impact on interstate commerce, because if the farmer had not grown his own wheat, he might have purchased wheat elsewhere, which might have traveled through interstate commerce if he had. And so, with the obvious premeditated intention of drastically expanding federal power, the court simply manufactured a new legal excuse for putting nearly everyone and everything under federal control. Recently, the Supreme Court fabricated another new legal principle out of thin air to allow President Obama to force citizens to purchase private health insurance. As a result, Congress can now not only tax, regulate, control, and forbid anything it pleases, but can even force citizens to spend their own money on certain products or services, bringing to an end even the flimsiest facade of a federal government of limited powers. Both major political parties have enacted legislation far beyond anything the Constitution ever authorized, while continuing to appoint judges who will give their blessing to such actions. And this has often occurred with public approval, by people more interested in the promise of being protected and taken care of than they are in the fundamental principles of freedom. Ultimately, the American politician and the American voter have cooperated to completely destroy one of the primary checks against tyranny.
Ah, the government. It loves you and wants to keep you safe and well. It even wants to make paying taxes, fines, and court costs easier for you. How? Well, you'll need to meet your straw man. He was born the same day you were, He looks like you, has the same name, and lives in your house, but you never knew he existed. You will have even paid his parking tickets or taxes. The worst part? He's been dead from day one. From every birth certificate, a legal personality, or legal fiction, is created with the same name to confuse little old you into thinking it's you. So, there is a human you and a paper you, or as it's commonly known, a straw man. So when it seems like government officials, court clerks, or the police are speaking English, they aren't. They're speaking legalese, designed to make you agree to verbal and written contracts without even knowing about it, all spun from Black's Law Dictionary. For example, when the police say, "Do you understand?" you'll say, "Yes." What they are really saying is, "Do you stand under our authority?" Oops-a-daisy, you just created a verbal contract with them. Oh, you clever government. Did you know that whenever you register something, you are handing over title to the person you register it with? That's right. Whenever you register something with the government, they assume it belongs to them. Registered your car? Super! Now you are the registered keeper of your vehicle, and the government can crush it when you don't pay your, straw man's taxes. Expecting a new bundle of joy? Well then you need to register your little darling with a birth certificate. Then they can start the process all over again and create a new straw man for your little one. Isn't that great? So when Junior grows up, he'll be able to generate revenue just like you have. When you notify on your baby by signing the birth certificate, your child becomes a ward of state, and if the government doesn't like what you're doing, they'll assume it's okay to take the child away, or make new rules for things they don't like. Not enough school? Smacking your child? Shouting too loudly? Then it's off to social services for the little one. When you get a bill, it's sent to you, but belongs to your straw man, not you. That's why bills, fines, and summons start with Mr., Mrs., or Ms. Sometimes you'll see your surname in capitals, just like on a gravestone. That's because your straw man is dead, and just a silly piece of paper, created before you could comprehend or even consent to it. When you go to court, you represent your straw man, so you, the human, take on any costs, fees, taxes, and fines involved for the straw man. The human you doesn't even need to pay them. But you made a contract with the court by appearing on behalf of your legal personality or straw man, just like the government knew you would. Confused? Well, don't worry. The government doesn't want you to know anyway. If you knew, you'd stop paying things like council tax and parking tickets. Because when you go to court, you are representing your straw man. You are you, alive and made of flesh and blood. Your straw man, or legal personality, is a piece of paper created from your birth certificate. And you think it's you. What a silly Billy. Would you like to know more? Well then go over to tpuc.org. Get up, get informed, and get real.
The next obstacle to tyranny to examine is the concept of due process, which dictates that when the state intends to take someone's property or freedom, it may not do so arbitrarily, but may do so only by way of the legislative process, providing individuals with an opportunity to challenge the claims and actions of the government at an open and fair hearing before a neutral judge. And in criminal cases, the government may not punish people based on mere accusations or suspicions, but must provide evidence sufficient to convince a jury of his peers beyond a reasonable doubt that the accused has violated the law. While the Fifth Amendment mentions the right to due process, merely having such words on paper does not necessarily mean the principle will be adhered to in the real world. Indeed, similar concepts contained in the constitutions of Red China and the Soviet Union failed to stop those authoritarian regimes from murdering millions of human beings without charges or trial. The Constitution of the Weimar Republic, the government of Germany preceding Hitler's rise to power, was very thorough regarding the concept of due process, saying, quote, "The rights of the individual are inviolable."
You are watching a Paradigm Shift in Educational Comedy Special Edition presentation designed for broadcasting on Conscious Consumer Network Independent TV. These special edition segments are meant to take the best of Paradigm Shift in Educational Comedy, mixing and mashing the clips and redesigning them into a brand new derivative work for the purpose of both informing you and entertaining you. Each show will also air on the psecdocumentary YouTube channel 1 week after they are streamed on CCN. It is our intention to inspire others to view the negative as a positive opportunity for positive change, because without compassion in our actions, one is merely aware, but not necessarily awake. A platform of compassion and not falling for divide and conquer division tactics is the only way to bring in a new and better world that is not run by psychopaths. Speaking of psychopaths, we are here with Slick Willie, aka former President Bill Clinton. Mr. Clinton, has the rise of compassion within the human spirit caused any interference with your ability to rape women and molest children? And has this created any unforeseen phenomenon while you and your buddies worship that funky-looking stone owl during your cremation of care ceremonies at Bohemian Grove?
Well, Mr. Kelso, I tell you, this new conscious energy has been really hard on me and my wife Hillary. It's making it very, very difficult for me to do my presidential rape campaign. It's making it very difficult for me to keep it up anymore. I got to keep a line of Viagra constantly flowing into my veins to get it up. I can't even rape children like I used to. I've partaken in a lot of crazy shenanigans over the years, but 2017 has been one triggering year for me and the old pig. I mean, Hillary. My wife has become uglier and uglier and uglier. I have to put a bag over her head just to stick my slick in there. I'm afraid I might get diseased. After all, she's been on the campaign so long, she's starting to get AIDS or some sort of contraction of some sexual disease, that carpet munching pig. It just drives me nuts. My daughter, she's out banging more dicks than I know what to do with, including mine. My buddy Dick Cheney, we went out on a hunting trip, not a hunting accident. He has a tendency to have those every now and again out around the Bohemian Grove grounds, and these energies have been so harsh that the gun accidentally malfired and shot my dick off, and I had to get surgery done. It's now this robotic replacement now, and it sometimes has an electronic spasm and goes out of control, and I can't fucking stop it. It's like the Slick 5000, but as to the political stage, it's very confusing. Vladimir makes fun of me. He likes to leave uranium-encrusted dog shit on my porch, and he likes to harass me and make fun of me and laugh at me and tell me that I'm a loser, that I lost the election, and he calls me a little bitch boy. It really hurts my feelings, and I thought I was going to be able to rub it in his face. I was going to rub it in Putin's face. I'm really triggered. These energies are really triggered. It's not fair. It's not fair. My wife should have been the president, Madam President. I should have been the first man. I mean, the first bitch. I mean the first whore. I mean, the first man. I want to be screwing interns again. Not even a drip of Viagra on an IV can help me anymore. I can't. I'm just losing my mind. It's just getting crazy for me. I just can't do it. I feel like I'm going insane. Like my body's corroding and collapsing on me. I just can't do it. Now I'm on.
Oh my God, I think he's dead. Dave, I think you killed Clinton.
So much for a new world order, but based on what he was describing, sounds like maybe there's a bit of new world odor going on.
His corpse looks like a bag of odors and tricks. Yeesh. Gonna have to clean that shit up. Oh, and now it's leaking Viagra encrusted diarrhea all over my floor. I'm shit in educational comedy.
Situational comedy. Yeah, well, there you have it, folks. The rise of compassion is just taking those psychopaths and they're just becoming triggered little zombies that are just, yeah. Although don't worry, we'll be seeing Bill again. I'm sure they got a clone of him in the frozen locker, someplace, or so they say.
It's your heart and soul, it's your flesh and bones. Don't you let it go. You're the storm I find, bursting through my sky, taking all control. It's your heart and soul. It's your heart and soul. We'll be shining tonight. We'll be shining tonight. We'll be shining tonight. We'll be shining tonight. It's your heart and soul. It's your heart.